Setting the tweak on your T4 is a fairly simple process, which I will guide you through now. It's done in several steps, which some of the steps I've already done. I've already set the camber, and I've already tweaked the anti-roll bars on my car. There's already a video on my channel about the anti-roll bars, but the camber, I think most of you know how to set it. I use the hoodie setup gauges to set the camber. And finally, I make the car ready to race. I put the tires on the car with a battery inside, mounted the way it's supposed to run. Okay, so the ride height. The ride height gauge, you slide it underneath the chassis. We always measure the ride height in two spots, the front and the back. And at the setup sheets, we usually speak about the X's. They're marked here, these two X's. They mark the spot where we measure the ride height. So I slide the ride height gauge underneath these spots. Here is 5.2. Needs to come down a little because I want it to be 5. Just like that. You should just gently slide it underneath the chassis and it stops right there. So that means it's 5. And at the rear, let's see, it's 5.6, almost a bit too high, so we need to lower it. Same process here. So I try to loosen the preload by the same amount on both sides. And that's done. 5.2, right where I want it to be. Check the front again, so it's not out of level. That's done. Ride height is checked. The reason for measuring the ride height at the X's is, for example, on the carbon chassis, you'll have a lot of wear at the front, at this section here, and at the back when you drive on asphalt. So these parts of the chassis, they're gonna wear, and you're gonna have an inconsistent ride height measurement. That's why we always measure here in these two spots where the wear is a lot less apparent. Moving on, to make sure the top deck is not tweaked in any way. I mean, if you had a big crash, you need to check the straightness of the top deck. You need to take it out and look for it being bent or something being broken inside of the carbon. But if you just took the car off the track and you want to reset the tension of the top deck, what I do is I put it on the 10mm blocks, just like this. I loosen all the screws. It's not necessary to use a tweak stick, which is very popular. It's a pretty trick item that is popular on the market since a couple of years. It's not really necessary. I would only use it if I know that the chassis is slightly bent, and then I would use the tweak stick to sort of force the chassis into where it needs to be, but only temporarily. Let's say you don't have time to change the chassis and you want to do a run, I would use the tweak stick to push down the chassis onto the board before tightening the top deck. But in this case, I know my chassis is straight, I know my top deck is new, so I'm just gonna tighten it. I start with the screws closest to the center, so right here. I just tighten them enough to stay in place. I don't over tighten them. I don't want too much tension on the top deck. You can also use a tool which controls the torque that you apply to the screws, like a torque measurement screwdriver, which is really a really nice way to do this accurately. But if you've done it often enough, you sort of get a good feel for how much to tighten them. So that's all done, and we can move on to the next step. The next step of the tweak process is to set your downstops. So as you can see, I already put my car on the 10mm blocks, resting like that, straight. There's no rocking or anything, as we made sure from retightening the top deck. So now you take your hoodie downstop gauge, you slide it underneath the arm, right under the hinge pin. You see the spot where it's supposed to be measured at an angle, and in this case it's 5.8 under the front arm. Let's do the same on the other side. 6 doesn't fit, so it's 5.8. Then we'll do the same in the rear. In the rear you measure from the rear, and in the front you measure from the front of the arm. So that's the rule that we have, and that's how the team is measuring downstop. Here it's supposed to be 4.6. 4.6 just fits. Actually have to tighten it just a little bit. Yeah, now it's perfect. 4.6. Do the same on the other side. Yeah, remember that you need to measure from the rear of the rear arm and from the front of the front arm. Moving on to the last step in the process, and the most important one, which is the lift of the suspension. So I've installed the setup wheels already, and what you do is simply you put the car on a flat surface, take your screwdriver, you slide it into the little hole which is in the center of the chassis that marks the center line. So you need to put the screwdriver into that little hole, which means you're lifting from the dead center of the chassis. And you simply find a way to slightly lift it off the setup board to see which wheel lifts first, if any. It might be perfect already, but it's rarely perfect. And you need to figure out a technique that works for you, but I usually just gently lift it off the setup board to see which wheel comes off first. So now I can see that this wheel here is actually coming off a little bit later than this, which means that you need to do the opposite on the other side of the car, at the other end. So normally I would tighten this, but actually what you need to do is you need to loosen this. So you need to think about it as a cross loosening and tightening. So if this is coming off later, it means it doesn't have enough preload, but you actually need to do the opposite on the other side. So I would loosen this a little bit and tighten this. So you tweak the car on one end from the other end, if that makes sense. That's already better. Then I just do the same on the other end. Same procedure. If it's off, actually pretty good. It's slightly earlier on this side. This one stays on the floor longer, so it means that I will do the opposite. Loosen here or tighten here. Just think about what makes logical sense, and you do it on the opposite side of the car. If it's not coming up at the same time, you might check for other tweaks in the car, such as shock towers. You might need to loosen the 4 screws in the shock towers, see if there's any tweak there. Check for bent parts, check for bent aluminum part in the suspension or the bulkheads. Make sure your shock lengths are the same. Make sure your springs are all equal and not damaged, and so on and so forth. There's many reasons why the car might be tweaked, but I've shown you the basics of checking the tweak, and if you cannot sort it out, refer to this tutorial and you might send me a message if you're struggling. No problem, I'll help you.